The cold bit into Private Miller's bones like a starving wolf, relentless and unforgiving. Each breath was a dagger of ice in his lungs, a cruel reminder of the biting December air that had become his constant companion, his tormentor, his everything. He hunched deeper into the shallow foxhole, the thin, frozen earth offering scant protection against the biting winds that howled through the skeletal trees, a mournful dirge echoing the despair in his heart. The snow, pristine and deceptive, lay thick upon the Belgian Ardennes, a vast, white shroud covering the scarred landscape, concealing the horrors beneath its deceptive purity. But Miller knew what lay beneath. He carried it in his mind, in his very soul, the memory of shattered trees and fallen comrades, of blood staining the pristine white crimson, a stark, horrifying contrast that haunted his waking moments and permeated his nightmares with a relentless, icy grip. The silence, when it came, was almost worse than the shelling. It was a silence pregnant with expectation, a heavy, suffocating blanket of dread that promised more destruction, more pain, more loss. His gloved fingers, clumsy and numb with cold, tightened around the frigid metal of his M1 Garand. The cold steel a familiar, unwelcome comfort that offered no warmth but a semblance of purpose. Every fiber of his being screamed for warmth, for respite, for a moment of peace, a peace that seemed as distant and unattainable as the stars hidden behind the perpetually overcast sky, a sky that mirrored the gray, oppressive weight on his spirit. This was Bastogne, December 1944, and Miller was a ghost among ghosts, a phantom of a man, clinging to life with a tenacity born of primal instinct and a sliver of stubborn hope that flickered precariously in the vast, engulfing darkness. He closed his eyes for a moment, just a flicker, and saw her face, his wife, a vision of warmth and light, a stark, agonizing contrast to the icy hell that surrounded him, a memory that both sustained and tortured him, a beacon of what he fought for, a reminder of what he had lost, or might yet lose. The sheer, pervasive, bone-chilling cold was a character in itself, an omnipresent antagonist more subtle and insidious than any enemy soldier. It gnawed, it pricked, it seeped into his very marrow, making every movement a deliberate, painful act of will. His toes, he was convinced, were no longer his own, mere appendages of frozen flesh, disconnected and unresponsive. He flexed them inside his heavy, worn boots, a futile attempt to coax back a semblance of sensation, but the effort yielded nothing but a dull, pervasive ache that resonated with the throbbing pain in his joints. His fingers, encased in thick woolen gloves that offered only a fleeting illusion of warmth, felt like sausages, clumsy and unyielding. The M1 Garand, cradled against his chest, was an extension of this cold, its metal stock a conduit for the frigid air, transferring its merciless chill directly into his core. He could feel the tremor, not just from the external cold, but from an internal shiver that had taken root deep within him, a nervous tremor that spoke of fear, of exhaustion, of the cumulative trauma of days spent under siege. This was not a quick, violent tremor, but a subtle, persistent vibration, a low hum beneath the surface of his skin, a constant reminder of his vulnerability, his exposed state against the brutal elements and the even more brutal enemy. The snow, oh the snow, it was everywhere. It blanketed the landscape in an insidious, beautiful white, a deceptive cloak that hid jagged shrapnel, frozen bodies, and the tracks of silent, predatory patrols. Each flake, as it drifted down from the leaden sky, seemed to carry a weight of its own, settling softly but adding to the crushing burden on his shoulders, on his spirit. It covered the familiar contours of the land, transforming the Ardennes into an alien, desolate moonscape, a world rendered monochromatic and hostile. The trees, stripped bare of their leaves by the harsh winter, stood like gaunt sentinels, their skeletal branches reaching up to the sky as if in silent supplication or desperate warning. They provided little cover, their thin silhouettes offering scant concealment from prying eyes or incoming fire. Miller imagined them as ancient, suffering beings, witnessing the senseless destruction with an impassive, silent horror.
He felt a kinship with them, rooted to a spot, exposed, enduring the relentless battering of elements and the destructive forces of man. The sound of distant shelling was a familiar lullaby of dread. It wasn't a constant barrage, not right now, but a sporadic, guttural rumble that vibrated through the frozen ground, a low thrumming that was felt more than heard, a warning of potential future horrors. Each distant boom sent a fresh jolt of adrenaline through his system, a sharp, unwelcome surge that tightened his muscles and quickened his breath. He instinctively braced himself, his body preparing for impact, even when the sound was miles away, a mere echo of a distant skirmish. The anticipation was a torment in itself, a slow, agonizing drip of fear that eroded his resolve, piece by painstaking piece. He tried to focus on his breathing, on the simple, rhythmic intake and outflow of air, a fragile tether to the present moment, a desperate attempt to ground himself in the face of overwhelming anxiety. But even his breath felt shallow, ragged, edged with the metallic taste of fear. His gaze drifted to the other men in his squad, huddled in their own shallow depressions, silent and still. They were shadows, indistinct shapes against the snowy backdrop, each man lost in his own private hell, his own battle against the cold, the fear, the isolation. He wondered what they were thinking, if their thoughts mirrored his own, if they too saw the faces of loved ones, if they too yearned for the impossible warmth of a hearth fire, a hot meal, in moment of peace untainted by the stench of cordite and the whisper of death. Were they dreaming of home? Were they imagining escape? Or were they, like him, merely existing, one frozen breath after another, their minds fixated on the next moment, the next hour, the next agonizing passage of time in this desolate white purgatory? A low cough from Private Jenkins, 2 foxholes over, broke the heavy silence, a raspy hacking sound that spoke of sickness and exposure, a visceral reminder of the body's fragility, its inevitable breakdown under such relentless duress. Miller felt a pang of sympathy, a fleeting connection to another suffering soul, but it was quickly swallowed by his own internal struggles. Each man was an island, isolated by the immense, oppressive weight of their individual experience of this protracted, dehumanizing siege. The hunger was a dull, constant ache in his stomach, a hollow emptiness that had long since passed the point of sharp pangs and settled into a pervasive, gnawing sensation. His last K-ration, consumed hours ago in the biting darkness, felt like a distant memory, a meager offering to a ravenous beast that refused to be appeased. Thirst, too, was a constant companion, a dry, scratchy feeling in his throat that made swallowing a chore. He yearned for a hot cup of coffee, the kind his wife used to make, steaming and sweet, a simple luxury that now felt like an impossible dream, a relic from a forgotten age. He imagined the warmth spreading through his chest, thawing the ice in his veins, bringing a fleeting moment of comfort, a brief respite from the incessant torment. But there was no coffee here, only the occasional sip of frigid water from his canteen, which felt more like an act of survival than refreshment, barely alleviating the thirst before the cold rendered it even more pronounced. His uniform, once a crisp olive drab, was now stiff with frozen mud and ice, a second skin of discomfort. The wool chafed against his neck, the heavy fabric weighing him down, restricting his movements. He shifted slightly, trying to find a more comfortable position, a futile endeavor in the cramped confines of the foxhole. Every muscle in his body protested, a symphony of aches and stiffness, a testament to days of exertion, of carrying heavy gear, of digging, of constant vigilance. His shoulders burned, his back ached, his knees screamed in protest. He closed his eyes again, not in an attempt to sleep, but to momentarily escape the harsh reality, to retreat into the dark, comforting void of his own mind, even if only for a fraction of a second. But even there, the cold pursued him. The sounds of distant war echoed, and the faces of his fallen comrades flashed before his inner eye, a grim procession of ghosts.
The smells of war were an insidious tapestry woven into the very fabric of his existence. Damp earth, frozen mud, the lingering metallic tang of cordite, the faint, acrid scent of unwashed bodies, and beneath it all, the clean, sharp smell of snow. These odors, once distinct, had now merged into a singular, oppressive miasma that clung to his clothes, his skin, his very being. He wondered if he would ever truly shed them, if the scent of war would forever be etched into his memory, a phantom presence even in the sweetest peace. He thought of the smell of his wife's perfume, the fresh scent of pine needles in the forest behind their small cabin, the comforting aroma of freshly baked bread. These memories, once so vivid, now seemed distant, almost unreal, like fragments of a dream, overshadowed by the grim realities of his current sensory landscape. The contrast was a painful reminder of the life he had left behind, the life he fought to reclaim, the life that now seemed impossibly far away, separated by a chasm of ice and fire. Fear, he recognized, was not a single, monolithic emotion, but a complex tapestry of sensations and thoughts. There was the primal, gut-wrenching terror of incoming fire, the split-second panic that seized his limbs and tightened his chest. But there was also the insidious, creeping dread of the unknown, the gnawing anxiety that permeated every quiet moment, the fear of what lay just beyond the next ridge, the next tree line, the next breath. And then there was the deeper, more profound fear, the fear of failing his comrades, the fear of losing himself, the fear of becoming another nameless casualty in this vast, impersonal conflict. He had seen it in the eyes of others, this quiet resignation, this slow surrender to the overwhelming pressure, and he fought against it with every fiber of his being. He would not break, he told himself. He could not break. Not now, not when so much depended on it. His unit, the 101 1st Airborne, had been told to hold, to stand firm against the encircling German forces, and by God, they would hold, even if it meant freezing to death in these God-forsaken woods. Despair was a heavy cloak, always threatening to settle over him, to smother the last vestiges of hope. It whispered insidious suggestions in his ear. What's the point? You're surrounded, you're outnumbered, relief isn't coming. He fought against these thoughts, pushing them back with a stubborn refusal to capitulate. He knew that to give in to despair was to surrender, not just to the enemy, but to the cold, to the exhaustion, to the crushing weight of their predicament. Hope, however fragile, was a lifeline, a tiny spark in the vast darkness. He clung to it fiercely, nurturing it with memories of home, with the knowledge that General Patton's Third Army was out there somewhere, fighting their way through the ice and snow, pushing against the odds to reach them. He had heard the rumors, the whispers passed from man to man. Patton's coming, he's turned his whole army around, he's going to save us. It was a story, a legend in the making, and Miller prayed it was true, prayed it wasn't just another cruel fabrication, another false dawn in their relentless night. Anger, too, simmered beneath the surface, a hot, bitter resentment that occasionally flared within him. Anger at the Germans for launching this surprise offensive, for plunging them into this frozen hell. Anger at the perceived slowness of their own command, for leaving them isolated, vulnerable. Anger at the unfairness of it all, at being ripped from his peaceful life and thrust into this brutal, senseless slaughter. He imagined his anger as a small internal fire, a defiant spark that refused to be extinguished by the cold or the fear. It was a dangerous emotion, he knew, capable of clouding judgment, but it also fueled a stubborn resolve, a refusal to be broken. It was a counterpoint to the despair, a defiant scream against the silence, a declaration that he would not go down without a fight, that he would not simply fade into the snow. Fatigue was a constant, debilitating presence, a heavy shroud that weighed down his eyelids, dulled his thoughts, and sapped his strength. Days without proper rest, nights spent shivering in the open, the constant adrenaline spikes followed by crashes, all contributed to a profound, bone-deep weariness that no amount of sleep seemed capable of alleviating.
He thought about the Bastogne encirclement, the Bulge, as they called it, the desperate German offensive that had caught them completely off guard. They were surrounded, cut off, isolated. The word itself, surrounded, carried a chilling weight, a claustrophobic sense of being trapped, hunted. He remembered the briefings, the maps, the confident assurances that their lines were impenetrable, that the Germans were spent. How quickly those assurances had dissolved into the grim reality of their current predicament. He envisioned the enemy, the Wehrmacht, a faceless, relentless force, closing in on them, squeezing them tighter and tighter. He pictured the artillery, the tanks, the infantry, a vast, malevolent machine determined to crush them.
But then he remembered their own defiance, the famous reply, "Nuts." It was a small act of rebellion, a refusal to buckle under pressure, a rallying cry that echoed through the freezing woods, instilling a sense of pride, a sense of shared purpose in the face of overwhelming odds. His gaze fell upon his rifle, the M1 Garand, his constant companion, his protector, his only means of defense. He ran a gloved finger over the cold steel, feeling the familiar contours of the stock, the smooth action of the bolt. It was a tool, an instrument of war, but it was also a symbol of his agency, his ability to fight back, to defend himself and his comrades. He remembered the hours spent cleaning it, disassembling it, reassembling it, the meticulous ritual that had become second nature. Each part, each component was familiar, ingrained in his muscle memory. It was a link to his training, to the discipline instilled in him, a concrete reminder of his purpose. He checked the magazine, feeling the reassuring weight of the cartridges, a small measure of security in a world devoid of it. Then, a flicker of something in the corner of his eye. A small, laminated photograph, tucked into the inside pocket of his jacket, pressed close to his heart. He carefully, painstakingly pulled it out, his clumsy fingers fumbling with the stiff fabric. It was a picture of his wife, her smile warm and genuine, her eyes sparkling with laughter. A summer day, sunlight dappling through the leaves, a picnic blanket spread on the grass. A lifetime ago. He traced her features with his thumb, feeling the smooth plastic cover, a barrier against the harsh realities of his world. Her image was a stark, beautiful contrast to the desolate landscape around him, a vibrant splash of color in a world of gray. It was a reminder of what he was fighting for, a profound, personal motivation that transcended the grand narratives of war. It was love, pure and simple, a powerful force that fueled his will to survive, to return, to hold her again. He pressed it against his chest for a moment, absorbing the warmth of her memory, a fleeting comfort against the pervasive cold, a silent promise whispered to the winds. He carefully tucked the photo back into his pocket, ensuring it was safe, protected from the elements, from the violence that surrounded him. It was his most precious possession, more valuable than any weapon, any ration, any piece of equipment. It was his anchor to humanity, to the world he had left behind, to the future he so desperately hoped to reclaim. The act of holding it, even for a brief moment, had rekindled that tiny spark of hope, that stubborn resilience that lay at the core of his being. He took a deep breath, the icy air burning his lungs, but this time there was a faint tremor of renewed determination in it, a quiet resolve that pushed back against the encroaching despair. He looked up at the sky, a vast, oppressive canvas of gray, heavy with the promise of more snow, more cold. But even through the perpetual gloom, he imagined the sun, hidden behind the clouds, waiting to break through. A metaphor, perhaps, for their situation. The darkness was profound, the suffering immense, but somewhere, beyond the immediate horizon of their despair, there was the promise of light, of relief, of a breakthrough. He clung to this image, this fragile hope, nurturing it in the depths of his freezing, weary soul. Patton was coming. He had to be. The Third Army, a force of relentless will and undeniable power, was on the move. He could almost hear the rumble of their tanks, the roar of their engines, the triumphant sound of their arrival.
It was a phantom symphony, a figment of his imagination, but it was enough to sustain him, to fuel him for another minute, another hour, another cold, brutal night in Bastogne. The hours bled into each other, a monotonous, agonizing crawl of time. Each minute felt like an eternity, each tick of an imaginary clock echoing with the weight of impending doom or the promise of salvation. He tried to focus on small things, on the texture of the frozen earth beneath his gloved hands, on the intricate patterns of snowflakes melting on the barrel of his rifle, on the rhythmic pulse of his own blood in his ears. These small anchors to reality were his only defense against the crushing weight of the larger picture, against the overwhelming scale of the war, against the enormity of their predicament. He felt a profound sense of isolation, not just from the world outside, but from the very essence of himself, as if the war was stripping him bare, revealing a raw, primitive core of survival that he hadn't known existed.
He was a soldier, yes, but he was also just a man, a vulnerable, fragile human being caught in the inexorable grind of a global conflict, a cog in a vast, indifferent machine. His thoughts drifted to the philosophical musings he sometimes entertained in moments of quiet despair. What was the point of it all? This senseless destruction, this endless cycle of violence? Were they truly fighting for freedom, for democracy? Or were they just pawns in a larger game, sacrificed for abstract ideals? The answers eluded him, lost in the fog of war, obscured by the immediate demands of survival. Yet he knew deep down that there was a moral imperative, a fundamental difference between their cause and that of the enemy. They fought against tyranny, against oppression, against a darkness that threatened to engulf the world. This belief, however abstract, provided a fragile foundation for his duty, a reason to push forward, to endure the unbearable. He contemplated the nature of courage. Was it the absence of fear? No, he knew that wasn't true. Courage was the ability to act in spite of fear, to push through the terror, to do what needed to be done, even when every fiber of your being screamed for retreat. He felt fear, a constant, gnawing presence, but he also felt a stubborn refusal to be consumed by it. He saw it in the eyes of his comrades, this quiet, unassuming courage, this steadfast determination to hold the line, to face the impossible odds with a grim resolve. It wasn't the heroic, cinematic courage of Hollywood, but a raw, visceral, human courage born of necessity and loyalty, a testament to the resilience of the human spirit in the face of unimaginable adversity. The meaning of survival, too, was a complex question. Was it merely the absence of death, or was there a deeper significance to enduring such hardship, to bearing witness to such atrocities? He felt a responsibility to those who had fallen, a silent promise to carry their memory, to ensure their sacrifice was not in vain. If he survived, he would tell their stories, he would remember the faces, the names, the moments of shared laughter and terror. His survival would be a testament to their courage, a continuation of their legacy. It was a heavy burden, this responsibility, but it also gave him purpose, a profound reason to cling to life, to fight for every breath, every frozen moment in this desolate landscape. A sudden, sharp crack rent the air, closer this time, a rifle shot. Miller's head snapped up, his senses instantly heightened, his heart hammering against his ribs. Adrenaline surged through him, sharpening his vision, quickening his reflexes. He scanned the tree line, his M1 raised, every muscle tensed, ready for action. The sound of a second shot, then a burst of automatic fire, followed by shouting in German, guttural and menacing. A skirmish. Not in their immediate sector, it seemed, but close enough to send a fresh wave of panic through the quiet lines. He could hear the faint sounds of return fire, the distinctive rhythm of American rifles and machine guns. The sound of battle, even at a distance, was a visceral reminder of their precarious situation, of the constant threat that loomed just beyond their foxholes. He watched his comrades, their faces grim, their eyes wide with renewed apprehension, mirroring his own fear. They were ready, he knew, ready to fight, ready to die if necessary, but the weariness, the cold, the hunger had taken their toll. He thought of the phrase, the Western Front, a vast, sprawling theater of war, an impersonal designation for the unimaginable human suffering unfolding across countless miles of frozen earth. He was but a tiny speck, a single soldier in a vast, complex tapestry of conflict, but his personal experience, his fear, his hope, his suffering was real, palpable, immediate. It was not an abstract concept, but a visceral, grinding reality that consumed every waking moment and haunted every fitful sleep. He felt a profound connection to the countless soldiers who had come before him, who had endured similar hardships, who had faced similar fears across the vast, tumultuous expanse of human history. Their silent presence, their collective experience, offered a strange sense of solidarity, a shared burden across generations. The German offensive, the sheer audacity of it, still baffled him. To launch such a massive attack in the depths of winter through the Ardennes, a terrain thought impassable, was a testament to their desperate ambition, their willingness to gamble everything. But it was also a testament to their fanaticism, their unwavering belief in their cause, however twisted and malevolent it might be. He knew they were fighting a formidable enemy, an opponent driven by a grim determination, a force that had plunged the world into unimaginable darkness. This knowledge, however terrifying, also fueled his own resolve, solidifying his understanding of the stakes, of the profound importance of their stand here in Bastogne. He shivered, a deep, uncontrollable tremor that racked his entire body. It wasn't just the cold now, it was the lingering adrenaline, the aftermath of the distant skirmish, the renewed awareness of their vulnerability. He wrapped his arms tighter around himself, trying to conserve what little body heat he had, but it was a futile effort. The cold was a relentless thief, stealing warmth, sapping strength, slowly but surely eroding his very being. He wondered how much longer he could endure it, how much longer his body and mind could withstand this incessant torment. But then, a stubborn voice, deep within him, whispered, "You will endure. You must." It was a mantra, a silent vow, a declaration of defiance against the overwhelming forces of cold, fear, and despair. He focused on the rhythm of his breathing, a slow, deliberate cadence that helped to calm the frantic beating of his heart. Inhale, exhale, a simple, primal act, a testament to life itself, even in this wasteland of death. He was alive, he was still breathing, and that was something. It was a small victory, a precious gift in a world that offered so little. He felt the rough fabric of his uniform against his skin, the familiar weight of his helmet on his head, the reassuring presence of his rifle in his hands. These were the anchors to his reality, the tangible proof of his existence, his identity as a soldier in this brutal, unforgiving war. He thought of the Allied counteroffensive, the grand strategy, the larger movements of armies on maps far away, in warm, safe command centers. He was a small part of that, a tiny piece of a vast, intricate puzzle, but his part was vital, essential. Every foxhole held, every enemy repelled, every inch of ground defended contributed to the larger effort, to the ultimate triumph over tyranny. It was a comforting thought, a way to contextualize his individual suffering, to imbue it with purpose and meaning. He was not alone, not truly. He was part of something larger, something historic, something that would shape the future of the world. He closed his eyes again, this time allowing himself to truly rest, to drift into that hazy state between waking and sleeping, a precious reprieve from the harsh realities of his immediate surroundings. In his mind, he saw flashes of home, the warmth of his wife's smile, the laughter of children, the gentle sway of trees in a summer breeze. He held on to these images, these precious fragments of memory, like a drowning man clinging to a piece of driftwood in a raging sea. They were his hope, his reason, his sanctuary in the storm. The sounds of distant shelling, the whisper of the wind, the low hum of fear all faded into the background, replaced by the gentle symphony of his memories, a lullaby of longing and love.
He was just a private, a nameless face in a sea of uniforms, but in this moment, in the depths of his internal world, he was everything. He was a husband, a son, a patriot, a survivor. He was the embodiment of hope, of defiance, of the human spirit's unwavering refusal to be broken. His story was but one of many, a single thread in the vast tapestry of World War II, but it was his story, and he carried it with him, etched into the very marrow of his bones, a testament to the brutal realities of war and the enduring power of the human heart. The cold, the fear, the exhaustion, they were all still there, but beneath it all, a small, persistent flame flickered, a flame of hope, of resilience, of an unwavering determination to survive, to return, to reclaim the life he fought so desperately to preserve. The battle for Bastogne raged on, a brutal, relentless struggle against overwhelming odds, but within Private Miller, a quiet, personal battle was also being fought. A battle for his very soul, a battle he was determined to win. He would hold the line, not just for his country, but for himself, for his wife, for the promise of a future where the cold would be but a distant memory, and the warmth of home a tangible reality.
This was his testament, his silent vow, whispered into the frozen air of the Ardennes, a promise to himself, to his comrades, and to the world that he would endure. He was an American soldier, part of the legendary 101st Airborne, surrounded but never defeated, and as long as a single breath remained within his body, he would fight. The image of Patton's relief, a swift, decisive counteroffensive, was his guiding star, a beacon of light in the profound darkness of the siege, a symbol of the unwavering resolve that would ultimately turn the tide. He knew, deep in his weary heart, that they would prevail. They had to. The cost was too great, the stakes too high, for anything less than ultimate victory. His fingers tightened again around the cold, reassuring metal of his rifle, a silent pledge to his unwavering commitment. The wait continued, arduous and agonizing, but now a renewed sense of purpose, a determined, quiet resolve settled within him, anchoring him to the present, focusing his gaze firmly on the horizon, waiting for the dawn, waiting for Patton. He was a small man in a vast war, but his spirit was unyielding, his will unbreakable, his hope a persistent flame against the encroaching darkness. He was a soldier of Bastogne, and he would not yield. Not now, not ever. The cold was a test, the fear a challenge, but his spirit was forged in the fires of adversity, stronger than any obstacle, more resilient than any foe. He took another deep breath, the frosty air filling his lungs, and watched the gray sky, waiting for the first sign of hope, the first tremor of approaching salvation, the unmistakable roar of Patton's Third Army breaking through the German lines, bringing the warmth of relief to this frozen hell. He would be ready. He would endure. He would fight. His commitment was absolute, unwavering, a bedrock of resolve against the crushing weight of the siege. He was a testament to the indomitable spirit of the American fighting man, a symbol of the tenacity and courage that defined the defenders of Bastogne. His individual struggle, his personal torment, was a microcosm of the larger conflict, a single, compelling narrative within the epic saga of World War II. He felt the weight of history on his shoulders, the profound significance of their stand, and it fueled his resolve, empowering him to push beyond the limits of exhaustion and fear, to stand firm against the relentless onslaught. This was his war, his moment, his unwavering testament to courage and resilience, a silent scream of defiance against the icy grip of death, a powerful affirmation of life itself. He would not just survive, he would live, and he would remember, carrying the burden and the triumph of Bastogne within him forever, a testament to the strength of the human spirit in the darkest of times. The hope of Patton's lightning-fast counterstrike, the strategic brilliance behind it, was the fuel for his soul, the promise of liberation from this brutal encirclement. He imagined the precise movements, the rapid deployment, the sheer audacity of pivoting an entire army 90 degrees and driving 150 kilometers across frozen terrain.